Hey guys, Palsteron here, and today let's talk about my Poison Spark Occultist. For my next build, I wanted something that would absolutely decimate Simulacrums for my upcoming 100 Simulacrum challenge, while also being able to do 100% deli comfortably and just being an all-rounder in general to finish some of my challenges, and I can safely say I found it. With the help of Phantasmal Spark and Ashes of the Stars, we convert 100% of lightning damage to chaos, giving Spark the ability to poison. Being able to scale the poison off of elemental damage as well as chaos damage gives us a lot of options, for example, incorporating elemental overload into the build for a free 40% more poison damage, or getting a ton of duration on Spark because it now scales off of Malevolence. As well as that, we're using as enough Sentinel Touch on top of the explosions we already got from the Occultist, because, well, it's double explosions. We also have the usual Aegis Aurora, Melting of the Flesh, Capped Block, 50k armor defenses that let us face tanks most things the game has to offer. Overall, I absolutely love the build, and even though with current Ashes of the Stars prices, it's not really budget viable, the build has performed on an extremely high level throughout some of the hardest content in the game, even getting us to level 100 naturally while doing Simulacrums. With that being said, let's get into the build portion of the video. Before we get into some of the juicy stuff, like for example skill gems or items, let's quickly talk about how Spark actually works. And this is actually pretty important because I feel like a lot of people are just scaling Spark wrong. They're not going for enough duration, which is one of the big things about damage over time. When you have Malevolence, stuff like that, they don't go for enough projectile speed. So I want to kind of talk about that real quick. A quick disclaimer right at the start. Since GGG destroyed the drop rates of both Crystallized Omniscience and Ashes of the Stars here, you might be mistaken in thinking this can be a budget build because Maffle did this build last league and it looked glorious, right? Ashes of the Stars was 1 exalt. This league, very different. It costs like 40 to 50 exalts depending on when you watch this. And this is not one of those builds where Ashes of the Stars is optional. It is actually completely mandatory. So just pointing this out, this is definitely not a budget build. What this build is for is basically, I made this for Simulacrums. You can also do 100% Delirium farming without either Headhunter or Mageblood. The thing is, I usually actually run Mageblood. This is basically a replacement that I got for the intro because nobody wants to see Headhunter intros, right? But basically that is what this build is made for. It is very much a all-rounder build though. If you keep investing and pumping in currency, this is one of those builds that can really do everything in the game. But let's get right into it. So Spark is a lightning projectile spell that normally deals lightning damage. And as you might see, the lightning damage is actually quite low, and that's for a reason, because Spark can actually hit multiple times here. This is my #1 point with a 0.66 second internal cooldown. So if you put the Spark in here, you can see that if it drops against the wall, it will bounce off of that wall, basically giving you the chance to hit multiple times. This cooldown is basically just there to make it so you can't just shotgun enemies, right? Otherwise, if an enemy is there, you could just stand on him and all of these projectiles, you would basically hit 12 times every cast, which would be OP. But depending on how long the duration of your Spark is, you can definitely hit multiple times, and you will. That's why it is so good in kind of like more tight arenas, like for example Simulacrum. In order to understand this skill though, you have to understand a few things. So we said it can hit multiple times, but not next to each other. It can hit every 0.66 seconds. That means that increased duration gives you a higher damage ceiling because you have more chance to actually hit a single target. For example, once I press my Malevolence right here, I can see that my duration is 4.73 seconds. If we take that here, 4.73 divided by 0.66, theoretically, I could hit up to a single target up to 7 times. In reality, that's not going to happen. Sometimes 6 can happen depending on your arena, but something like 4 or 5 would be way more realistic in something like PoE, for example. But let's go further here. So it bounces from the walls. Therefore, the damage depends on the arena. You can imagine that an arena like this, right, it's going to bounce around like crazy and it's going to overlap on the same target like crazy. But on some other arenas, if I, for example, go here, you can see that everything is wide open and the sparks are just going to go everywhere. So that means that a lot of your damage will depend on what the terrain is that you're in. Now, here's the thing, right? Spark can get consumed even before the duration, right? #1 thing when it gets consumed would be when the duration runs out. But there's 2 more things that you have to think about. #1, it actually has a maximum range. And that maximum distance is going to be 150 units, which is going to be more than the screen. So it's usually not going to matter, but it definitely matters in very open maps, for example. But basically what you have to know about this is not from wherever you've casted, but next to you. So if a spark moves 150 units away from wherever you are at the moment, it doesn't matter where the spark has been cast. If you move along with the spark, it is not going to disappear. And the last thing that can also happen for it to disappear before the duration runs out is it has no pierces left. You can get a ton of pierces, for example, from the boots that I have here. I crafted this one pretty luckily, but you can get up to 5 pierces from boots, which are really, really good. And you can also craft +1 pierce. I got the AoE gems because I already have enough pierce. You can also get +2 pierce if you want to anoint piercing shots. Now, the reason why pierce is so important is if we don't have any pierce, the spark projectile is going to disappear before the duration is over, and basically we're going to have a lot of lost damage. So if we're scaling duration, we also have to have the pierce to back it up. Otherwise, for example, let's say I have like a 5-second spark duration. I have only 2 pierce, right? As soon as this one of my spark projectile goes through 2 enemies in that duration, it just disappears, basically making my duration scaling completely useless. Now, next up, duration gives a higher damage ceiling. We already talked about that. And faster projectiles is basically just there to facilitate this a little bit more. If you think about projectile speed, the faster something... So let's say this is the boss arena, right? I'm in the middle here, and this is everything where the spark bounces from. The faster it's back, right, from wherever I am, the faster it can overlap again. So faster projectiles is both clear and single target. It will help you hit that 0.66 internal cooldown way, way easier. And while mapping, it will also just make it feel way, way better because there's not as much of a delay once you cast and once it connects with an enemy. Now, a lot of you will probably have the question, why would I go poison over something like a normal spark crit build, right? For example, Inquisitor. Well, number one, I quickly want to explain how it actually works. So you have Phantasmal Spark, which gives, with its quality, gives 40% of lightning damage converted to chaos damage, which can poison then. And you also get Ashes of the Stars for a total of 100% conversion, because Ashes of the Stars at perfect roll gives us exactly 30 quality. But with that out of the way, let's ask the question, why do we actually go for poison? Number one is we get a lot of just straight up free duration from damage over time scaling. So it is not a coincidence that stuff that scales off of duration, like for example Blade Vortex, likes to be paired with poison, and that is simply because you get something like Malevolence. Now, from this one alone, I get a ton of increased duration. I also have Aura Effect, so I'm going to get around about 30% increased duration straight up, but that's not where it ends. A lot of these supporting nodes also work and give you just free duration. This node here gives me 15% duration of ailments, which I would have taken anyways. And on top of that, I'm just getting 15% increased skill effect duration for free once again. Next up, this node here is really strong, 27% increased chaos damage. Once again, free skill effect duration. Now, this all adds up to something like 50% increased duration, actually even more. I think it's like 60. And that gives you a huge boost to start with whenever you go for poison. Number two is you can actually make use of the more multiplier of elemental overload. Now, this might be a little bit confusing, but basically, if you are converting from lightning to chaos, that now means that all sources of lightning damage also scale all the poison damage that comes from lightning damage. So to hopefully make this a little less confusing, the way this works is you have stuff like increased lightning damage or more elemental damage, which should not scale your poison, but it actually does. But only if you're converting lightning into chaos, because the initial damage was lightning, so it gets scaled, and everything that comes from it also gets scaled, including poison. So what happens is all of these 1,000 lightning damage get converted to chaos, and that poison actually gets scaled with all lightning damage and elemental damage. But if you have, for example, stuff that is already chaos damage and did not get converted from lightning damage, for example, let's say we have like added chaos damage from some form of gear, that does not get converted and therefore does not scale with lightning damage. So that is why stuff like added chaos damage is really, really bad in the build. You really just want lightning damage that then gets converted to chaos. Next up, poison duration scaling is very, very huge. This kind of has to compare to, for example, crit multiplier, because normally what a spark build would do, a crit build would do, is it would scale crit, it would scale crit multiplier, so we have to get that damage from somewhere, and we can do that with poison scaling. We get a lot from the tree, but the most important role here is the the increased duration of ailments you inflict while focused. Now, this mod is absolutely mandatory on the build. You have this button that basically is there for 4 seconds, and during those 4 seconds, you're just dealing almost double damage. It is a complete no-brainer in the build. You can also craft it. It is a Ashling mod. As well as that, we can scale our duration further with Awakened Unbound Ailments. This gives us another 80% increased duration of ailments, which is especially huge whenever the focus mod is not up. After that, explosions, which for me is probably the biggest reason, but yeah. So explosions number 1, we can run Occultist, which means we're going to actually scale the explosions. Usually if you're, for example, a lightning build that just takes these for funsies, you're not really scaling it. But in this build, we actually are, because we're poisoning. And the thing about this build is we actually have a 100% global chance to poison. We're going to talk about that in the skill gem section. But we made it so our Herald of Agony is gives us a 100% global chance to poison, which means both Profane Bloom and also Azanuffs will both be able to poison. And at the end, also something that comes with damage over time scaling is you get an easy Temporal Chains and Enfeeble. Temporal Chains gives you even more duration, because what Temporal Chains does is basically an enemy will keep its negative effects longer, which is basically a more multiplier for your duration. On top of that, everything is slowed, and then you can also chunk on Enfeeble on top, which we're doing right here. We get Whispers of Doom, and we also get the +1 cursed from Malediction. But next up, let's talk about defenses. So I actually leveled this build on stream to 100 in Simulacrums, all the way from, I think I started at 97 or something, all the way to 100. We're currently 58 Simulacrums in, and we died a total of 3 times. So yeah, this build is about as tanky as you need it to be. Aegis Aurora, I think we all know how extremely strong this item is. Now, our defenses are basically, let's rattle it down. We're using Melding of Flesh. We're getting 88% max res, 90 is possible. You have 50k armor plus Molten Shell. This is really, really important as well, because a lot of your region will come, or your energy shield recovery will come from Aegis Aurora, and this also scales with armor. We reach about 4k life and about 3k energy shield. I will say straight up, there is a lot of stuff you can still fumble around. For example, you can remove this medium cluster if you want and fill out some of these life nodes. I'm going to be honest, I just don't really die in Simulacrums. It didn't really feel necessary. Like I said, we just leveled to 100 in Simus. It just felt unnecessary. I just wanted more damage. So enemies die faster and they get more rewards. Overall, this is just totally fine. You have 75% block and spell block. We are, however, using glancing blows, so we don't have to invest as much. The reason we're using glancing blows, once again, because it makes it so our Aegis Aurora procs more often. We're also ailment immune on this build, and that's because we're running Purity of Elements. Where is it? There it is. And the thing is, you really want to be ailment immune. You don't just want to go for cannot be frozen or immune to chill, stuff like that. If you want to farm Simulacrums, you need to also be able to be immune against Scorch and Brittle, all the alternate ailments. As for recovery, we have our energy shield is completely from Aegis. You don't need any energy shield leech. It can be nice, but you just don't really need it. If you have enough armor, whenever you get hit, you get like 1,000 energy shield back. So it is just like insane. So energy shield is basically covered. And as for life, we have a combination of life gain on spell hit, which I get from this ring right here. You can get up to 18. And then I also have the leech from the Edziri's Promise. Right, but let's show you guys some gameplay so you can actually get a feel for the build. What kind of buttons do you have to press, etc. Now, I made this basically for Simulacrum farming, so I'm going to show it off in Simulacrum. This is now wave 29. Now, we do have our Spark, which is going to be our main skill. You're also going to pre-fire, because obviously it has a duration. So before the wave even starts, you can pre-fire. I have Val Molten Shell and Molten Shell. Molten Shell is on left click. If you don't like this, you can also put it on cast when damage taken. Val Molten Shell is our oh shit button as always. Usually I press this whenever both bosses come up, like in wave 29 and wave 30. Both will have both bosses, so that's where it's going to be pressed. Then I have Focus on top, which is going to give me a huge amount of damage with the duration of ailments. And then as for movement skills, I have Shield Charge and I have Flame Dash. Usually I use Flame Dash quite a bit during Simulacrums, so you get entangled out of these rare mods that slow you down like crazy. And then you have Malevolence. Whenever you press this, you're going to lose quite a bit of HP. I don't want to press it right now, but it's basically going to shoot up immediately again because we have Edziri's Promise, which is going to leech for us, and we also have the life gain on spell hit. Also for the showcase, I removed both my Headhunter, and I also don't use my Mageblood. I just put this Stygian Bison here. Obviously, either Headhunter or Mageblood would definitely be GG. Let's look how this one goes. I haven't really run one in a while without Headhunter here, so let's just start out. This one has 10 LE pens, so we could actually die. Let's be a little bit more careful. Aegis usually should just make everything quite easy. Here we got hit pretty hard. We have to just be careful about... we definitely have to be careful about the double bosses coming out in a second, right here. Yep. We have to be a little bit careful about Kosis. Let's press our Molten Shell. Let's get some damage in, and they're basically dead because we pressed our focus, and they have some crazy amount of poison duration. And let's just go up and clear the way. If we didn't get to 6 rewards, which is a little annoying. I guess with Headhunter, Mageblood, getting that little bit of extra power, you would get to 6. Yeah, usually this is kind of a breeze. This is what the build is made for. Let's show you a map real quick. So here I'm in the Glacier. For mapping, you definitely want the Shield Charge instead of Flame Dash. So once you hit something, you're going to explode. Now you can obviously do rituals and stuff like that. I'm just going to head to the boss just to kind of show you how this would go right here. You just cast your Spark, you move, cast your Spark, move. We have a big Harbinger here. Let's do this guy real quick. Everything should be exploding like crazy. You're an Occultist. You have Azanuffs. You're going to be very, very well equipped for mapping. And this is, once again, without a Headhunter, without a Mageblood. This is how it would look like. Let's get to the boss real quick. As always, when it comes to single target, it will very much depend on how the arena is. For example, in here, the arena is fine. Some other encounters, like, for example, Maven, the arena is really, really good. Then again, something like Searing Exarch, the arena is really, really big, so that can be a huge downside. So if you want to fight uber bosses, there's definitely some that are easier and some that are less easy. For example, Cyrus is also kind of a bitch. But yeah, let's go here real quick. Let's wait for the boss. Let's put everything down. Val Molten Shell, we're already pre-fired. He should be... yeah, he's dead. All right. So this is how mapping looks like. This is kind of an all-rounder. So yeah. As for Ascendancy choice, it's pretty straightforward. Occultist is far and away the best choice. Obviously, we get the explosion from Profane Bloom. Not only that, but we have 3 different hexes, which means that being able to afflict enemies with that are hex-proof with hexes is going to be huge. And we have more curse scaling with Malediction. Like I said, we're using Despair, Temporal Chains, and Enfeeble. So this combined with the +1 from the Whispers of Doom gives us a total of 3 maximum curses, and we also get Curse Effect, which is very strong. And then Void Beacon, -20 Chaos Res. One of the biggest problems with Chaos damage in general, especially Chaos damage over time, is there's no real way to reduce enemy resistances. There's Despair, which is cute, but it has less effect against bosses, for example. But Void Beacon straight up -20, which is huge. And then we also have Withering Presence. Not only does this help us fix our Chaos Res, it also gives us more Chaos damage, and it helps a little bit with Withering, although we're going to go over that. You don't really need it all that much. All right, so next up, let's talk about items. The most important item, unfortunately, an item that you have to play this build, in my opinion, is Ashes of the Stars. So the quality roll has to be perfect. You can just use a few Divines. Divines are pretty cheap this league. The Reservation efficiency, depending on what you need from your gear, you can sort out for yourself. As for Aegis Aurora, now, I think also we have Charisma allocated, yeah. So our Anoint is Charisma down here. Once again, this will have to do with how much Reservation efficiency you have, but Charisma is just extremely strong and a really good choice. As for Aegis Aurora, this shield basically holds the defenses of this build together. I think most of us at this point know how broken it is. As for Corruptions, I would say physical damage taken as whatever, right? Cold, lightning, fire is probably GG. And one thing as well that can actually kill you in some instances is crit in Simulacrum can kill you. So a little bit of reduced extra damage from critical strikes goes a long way as well. Now, as for Azanuffs, these are basically there for Explodey. We already get 40% chance to explode from Occultist, but having more explosions is just really nice. It's good against corpse detonation, and just in general, offensively, will help you clear quite a bit. I would not use this without Azanuff, but you can cut them if you want to. It will be basically impossible to get your curses, though, and then you will have to run Blasphemy setups that will use a lot of your mana reservation. So I don't know. I would not personally recommend it. I think Azanuffs are really, really strong. Now, obviously, I have the GG here, which is you get Temporal Chains from the Azanuffs themselves, and then have both Despair and Enfeeble. Most people that didn't snipe this item will just get the Despair on your second ring. As you can see here, my second ring is pretty bland, other than really good implicits, right? So here is where you would get your Despair, and then you get an Azanuff with Enfeeble on hit, for example, or if you don't want to go that defensive, you can just not go for Enfeeble. That's definitely also a choice. As for weapon, we actually crafted this one ourselves. And what we did is we used Recombinators. So the way I made this wand here in particular is I basically recombinated together a few chaos damage over time multiplier and damage over time multiplier fractured wands, and I just tried it to land. If you don't know how Recombinators work, I will leave a guide down below from somebody on Reddit who wrote a really, really good manifesto about it. But the TLDR is, after a lot of failure, we got it at some point. And then what we did is we used essences to finish it up. So we used Deafening Essences of Zeal, which on a wand give us 32% increased cast speed, the one you see here. And we just, I don't know, slammed them. The good thing about having 2 fractured mods is those already locked in, and you only need to hit, in this case, +1 lightning spell skill gems. We really would have liked to have +1 to all skill gems, but after spamming these for a lot, we just settled on this. As for chest, Spark scales incredibly well with levels, and the way you get levels is from corruptions. Now, the thing is, you don't have to get a Skin of the Loyal. There's other chests you can go for. For example, a Lionized chest, which gives you supported by Pierce, which would already sort out your Pierce, which is nice. It also has a huge amount of armor, good life roll. So that is also a very good choice to make, but you want some corruption. So +2 duration and projectile gems would be the GG. Something like +2 and +1 comes next. And then if you can't afford that, you can also just go for a +2. Now, as for rings, what rings should do for you is give you cast speed, good defenses like life or energy shield, and also life gain for each enemy hit by your spells. Now, you don't need 2 life gain on spell hit. If you can, that's probably a little bit overkill, is what I found usually. You get a lot from Aziri's Leech as well. But knock yourself out. And you also have to kind of make sure that your mana cost is actually down to 1 or 2. So in this case, I have 2 mana cost, and you have to kind of like even this out. I have inspiration in the build, and then I also took this whole cluster, the Dreamer cluster, with reduced mana cost of skill from this here. So you just want to get your Spark down to like 3, 2, or 1 mana. So for example, as you can see here, I only crafted on -4 mana cost, because if I crafted more, my inspiration couldn't proc anymore because I would have 0 mana cost. Then we have my boots. If you haven't checked this out, this is one of the highlights I posted. I basically got super lucky. We wanted to throw together some boots with Recombinators. And this happened, kinda. I would have been fine with 4 of these mods, but I got all of them. I don't know how. It was like a 9% chance or something. So now, obviously not everybody will have a mirror to mirror these, so I will just spell it right out. Number 1, the most important one, is Pierce. Now, you don't need that if you're going to use a Lionized chest, because if you use a Lionized chest, you already get 3 Pierce, and then maybe you get 1 more on the helmet craft, and you're good to go. But in terms, if you don't have that, Pierce is going to be the most important one, followed up by Tailwind down here. Tailwind is really, really strong. It doesn't have to be elevated Tailwind, followed by movement speed to just make everything feel a little bit better, and then maybe you can fix some resistances if there's some suffixes left. As for helmet, all I did was I bought a Hubris Circlet with 99 life fractured. I got the Sparkfire's free additional projectile enchant on, which I think is the GG for this build. And then all I did is I spammed the mana reservation efficiency essences, which are right here, the Deafening Essence of Loathing. And I spammed these until I got something decent. As you can see here, I got a Hybrid Life, which isn't as good as Increased Energy Shield, but I just stopped it there because I did hit the Ashling, which is very nice. Now, you can definitely use these here, which is what I did. You can use Eldritch Exalted and Eldritch Orb of Annulments to help your prefixes and your suffixes. So that is also why, in order to manipulate your implicits, so you can actually craft with those, definitely make the implicits after your helmet is already finished. And as for implicits, you definitely want mana reservation efficiency. And as your second mod, there's a few things you can do. I went for Despair Curse effect, but I think the best would be cast speed. I just didn't want to spam at that point. And you can also go for area of effect to scale your explosions a little bit more. And at the end, this is basically a placeholder. I put in a jewel with some life. I threw a Dex Essence on this because I need the Dex for my gems. Usually I'm running a Headhunter. Now, I don't think it's actually that smart. If you're smart, and you have the money, you should be running a Mageblood, most likely. But if you can't, as always, you're probably going to need Dex. You're probably going to you might need some strength. You're going to need life, but you can't really get that much from Belt, which is if you can get your hands on a Headhunter or a Mageblood, that is huge. As well as that, the enemies withered by you have -6 to all resistances. Is actually pretty nice. It's like 7% more damage or something on PoE. So if you can get that, that's the icing on top. Next up, as for jewels, and this is really, really important. Your source of wither is going to be Glorious Vanity, and you want Ritual of Shadows on either one of these because they only cost you 1 point. Ritual of Shadows gives you 25% chance to inflict Withered for 2 seconds on hit. Since we're duration scaling, these are going to last a long time. We also have the 2 small nodes here, which makes it so Wither expires slower. And on top of that, you have just a ton of hits with Spark. So you're going to be on 15 Withered stacks basically immediately. You don't need this ×2, just ×1 is totally enough. And if you can, also get some nice stuff on the small nodes right here. And we're using Transcendent Mind, and this is basically just to give us a lot of damage over time multi. It's really, really strong right here. All this int is going to get converted to damage over time multiplier. I wanted to get this in here because you need a Corrupted Blood jewel. We don't have Corrupted Blood immunity anywhere. So yeah, just get one that is as good as possible. As for Watchers, I would say there isn't really anything mandatory on here. The damage over time multiplier Malevolence is extremely strong. Now, I also went for the Unaffected by Bleeding while Malevolence. If you don't have that, you're going to have to get it on one of your Flasks. And as well as that, our third mod is also pretty nice accidentally because we are using Purity of Elements, so we take less physical damage. There's a ton of mods you can get in there because we're running quite a few auras. And then obviously at the end, we have Melding of the Flesh, which is our big star in here. This is how we get to 88% max res because we're scaling Purity of Ice, and we have Aegis for the maximum cold resistance, which is going to get us to 88%. We're not really scaling anything else, but you definitely can get it to 90% as well. As for Flasks, we're using a Serious Promise to give us Chaos Damage Leech. It's also a little bit of increased damage on top, but that's not really why we're using. It also caps our Chaos resistance. We're using a Quicksilver Flask that straight up just makes us faster, which I actually forgot to divine. Wow, we're missing out on 2 move speed right there. We have a Granite Flask, which scales our armor to the 50k for the Molten Shell, which is incredibly strong. We are using a Phasing Flask because phasing is always nice to have, especially if you have a Headhunter and you have these ice prisons around you. Definitely always go for a Quartz Flask or just phasing in general. We got a little bit of cast speed on here as well. And we're also using a Jade Flask just because just this Jade Flask alone, I think, gives us like 30 or 40% chance to evade. We're not really scaling Grace or anything, but that's pretty damn nice in my book. And on top of that, we get some reduced effect of curses on us. Next up, let's talk about skill gems. Number 1, we have our Phantasmal Spark, level 21. This is going to be our main skill. And in here, we have Awakened Deadly Ailments. Now, what I already talked about is you don't have to run this. If you feel like you're not reaching your leech cap, you can also skip it and replace it for something else, like, for example, a Cruelty support, Awakened Void Manipulation. It's not a Chaos skill gem, so we don't get the +1, but it's 39% more damage. There's nothing better in there. Elemental Focus is a superstar in this build. Once again, the poison gets scaled by more elemental damage, and since this is an elemental skill gem, Elemental Focus is just a complete no-brainer. Unbound Ailments, also complete no-brainer. Gives you a ton of increased duration and just more damage over time. And really important is Divergent Inspiration. Now, Divergent Inspiration basically makes it so our Spark costs almost no mana. You have to be careful though. Like I said earlier, you don't want it to be at 0 mana because then you don't get the more damage multiplier from Inspiration. You want it to be, the best would be 1 mana. For me, it's 2 mana. 1 mana would be perfect. And this gives you a lot of reduced mana cost right here. Also, something I want to mention once again, since you might be using a Skin of the Loyal as well, you don't have to get exactly these colors. You can also replace one of these support gems with Cruelty. The ones you can replace are Awakened Void Manipulation and Awakened Deadly Ailments. Something you can also do is get a Awakened Spell Echo. Awakened Spell Echo or Spell Echo, like I have it here, makes you cast more sparks, which will give you more life gain on hit. The reason I am not using it is because in my setup, I'm actually using a Headhunter, and Headhunter often gives you that buff that repeats, and that does not scale with Spell Echo. So whenever I have that buff, my Spell Echo is basically dead. But if you're running, for example, Mageblood or any other belt, you can definitely go for Spell Echo. Now, why am I saying this? Once again, Skin of the Loyal, you cannot change the colors, which then means that you might have to experiment. There's only so many in the market. It's late in the league. So definitely play around with Cruelty, which is a red gem, and Spell Echo, which is a blue gem. Next up, we have our aura setups. So we have 2 Enlightened 4s in here. Divergent Herald of Agony is incredibly strong. And here's why. So Divergent Herald of Agony, 23 quality. I think 22 also works. If you put that in here right now, if I turn it on, T, you can see that on the Spark, I have a chance to poison of 102% right here. So this works because I have Divergent Herald of Agony, which its quality is it gives you even more. So normally it gives you 20% chance to poison. The quality gives an extra 20, in this case 23, because I have 23 quality. It also gets even more quality from Ashes of the Stars, which in total then comes out to 73%. But on top of that, we're also scaling Heralds in general, because we're using Herald of Thunder and Herald of Agony, and we get more Herald effect, which in total then totals out to 102% chance to poison. Now, if for some reason that doesn't work for you, maybe you don't get a 23 quality, or maybe something else is off, I don't know. You can always help yourself with getting this node right here, chance to poison on hit with spell damage. There's also medium clusters with the notable septic spells, which gives you a chance to poison on spell hit. So those you can use in case something goes wrong and for some reason you cannot get that. You always want to be on 100% chance to poison. On top of that, we have Divergent Tempest Shield. Divergent just gives us a little bit more extra chance to block spell damage. This one is pretty damn strong. I actually don't know where these were. Let me check. 3 blues. Oh, it was here. Okay. And then we also have Herald of Thunder. Herald of Thunder is straight up just there for the extra damage from the flat damage that it gives us. And since we're already scaling Heralds, it's like 30% more damage or something. And then we have our defensive setup. And this is the usual Determination, of course. Now we're using Purity of Ice because we're scaling cold resistance for melding of the flesh. And this also just fixes our gear a little bit. We don't have to get as many resistances, which is nice. These get scaled by all the increased aura effects, which with Anomalous Purity of Elements just gives us a huge amount of resistances. As you can see on our gear, we almost have none. So these fix a ton of that, especially since melding of the flesh gives a minus 70 auras, right? So these are in here. Now, one thing I want to say as well is Purity of Ice, you really want to have this on level 23. So you can get it to 21, and then you get +1 anyways from Ashes of the Stars, but then you still need to get +1 level. Now, if you have +1 all spell gems on your wand, which I don't have here, but I only have lightning skill gems, right? But if you had that, you wouldn't have to think about it anymore. But if you don't, you definitely want this +1 to level socketed AoE gems. Now, once you have this on level 23, this will turn to 5 additional maximum cold res instead of 4, which then gets once again scaled by the increased aura effect. If you don't have that, you're going to be missing out on 2 max res, which is also going to be 2 fire and 2 lightning max res, right? We have this in here. Now, then we're kind of showing this up with a little nice tech here, which a lot of people are using nowadays with Anomalous Blood and Sand. And what this does is it gives us increased projectile speed while in sand stance. This has nothing to do with the first line. It's only about the quality. This is obviously usually a melee gem. But yeah, we're scaling this because we also have Ashes of the Stars. This gives us even more projectile speed, right? So with this and Ashes of the Stars, together, we already get, as you can see here, 53% increased projectile speed. And then with Enhance, we get up to 85 projectile speed. Now, obviously, don't buy Awakened Enhance unless you have a lot of money. We actually hit this ourselves, so I thought might as well use it. Spoiler alert, 8% extra projectile speed is not worth 50 exalts. And then at the end, we also have Anomalous Defiance Banner. You want to put this in the same setup as you want Enhance, because that gives you even more armor. And at the end, we have our Divine Blessing setup. Divine Blessing with Life Tap, obviously, and then we have Divergent Malevolence. Divergent gives you a little bit extra damage. It doesn't really matter. Malevolence, basically just you press it, you get more damage, more duration. It's huge. And then we have, obviously, our Molten Shell. In this case, we have Val Molten Shell. Val Molten Shell, as always, is this kind of oh shit button. For example, I press it if I'm like late in the Simulacrum and there's like double boss on me or something. Usually I don't need it though. If you're more on a budget, you might need it. Now, as for Shield Charge, I'm just simply using Shield Charge with faster attacks. I also threw a Flame Dash in there to get over hurdles where Shield Charge doesn't work. As for the passive tree, this one is basically all about the cluster jewels. I will show you in a second. Now, some important stuff is, for example, we go for Potency of Will. This is duration scaling with the Mastery that gives us 10% more skill effect duration. Down here, you can fix your reduced mana cost. You might have to play around with this a little. For example, you don't want to go to 0 mana cost, but you also don't want to have like 10 mana cost. That can be very, very hefty. We don't really have any mana regeneration. We definitely don't want to use a mana flask. So in this case, for example, I have a mana cost of 2 with the help of Rings and Divergent Inspiration. Once again, this is our Impossible Escape, which lets us take all of these points. Now, if we go up here, we have Elemental Overload. I already talked about this one in the How Does Spark Scale section. Here, just more dot multi, we get the skill effect duration. Up here, Corruption is extremely strong. Right now, I actually have the Chaos Res here, but I'm going to switch out a little bit of my gear, and then I'm going to be Chaos Res capped anyways, and then I can go for the dot multi or the increased Wither effect, which gives us even more damage. And up here, Discord Artisan and the small nodes are really, really important to get your chance to poison to 100 with Herald of Agony. Here we take all the mana reservation efficiency that we can. We go down. We're going to talk about the clusters in a second. Once again, it is incredibly important that you have a Doriani, right? Glorious Vanity that gives you Corrupted Soul. And it also has the Ritual of Shadows either here or here. Now, you can also go for it right here. If you path differently, this would be a little bit different. For example, you would remove these points completely, get the reduced mana cost through here, and then you can maybe get it up here, but just try to get one either here or here. Let's just talk about the cluster jewels right here. These are quite important. Now, since lightning damage scales are poison, since we're converting, that means we can make use of some of these crazy cluster jewels. This does not work with Chaos, because on Chaos you would get attack and cast speed with Chaos skills, and Spark, even though you convert, it's still not a Chaos skill, it's still a lightning skill. So you want to have the lightning ones, right? What you need is 35% increased effect and exactly 3% increased attack and cast speed with lightning skills. Not 25%, not 2% attack and cast speed. It has to be exactly those. You have to alteration spam to make these, and then you can wriggle into something lucky. In this case, I put a lot of currency into this one. So this one also fixes my dexterity with the all attributes, and it also gives us quite a bit of life. And as you can see here, with the effect and the attack and cast speed, this actually gets it from 3% attack and cast speed to 4%, which you might think is not that big of a deal, but over these nodes and these nodes, that is a total of 20 cast speed and like, I don't know, what, 60% increased damage, a lot of life, a lot of attributes. We're also fixing our resistances down here. So on top, we have all attributes, and on this one we have elemental resistances to cap our resistances, because that's pretty hard to do with Melding of Flesh otherwise. So that's basically the gist of it. You just take all of these really, really premium nodes. I mean, look at this here: 16 lightning damage, 9 life, 4 auras, and 4 cast speed. Now, this is the best way to scale your Spark, but it doesn't mean that there's no replacement. You can also go for the normal chaos scaling, right? The normal chaos clusters, and then go for more mediums. For example, here I have Wicked Pal and Wasting Affliction, which is really, really strong. I didn't really have much space, so you can also go for your normal 8 passives, chaos, and you can just use more mediums. Overall, I can tell you already, I did the POBs. It is worse, quite a bit worse. You're also going to have a lot less cast speed, so it will feel worse. But if you're on a budget, you'll have to make do. Otherwise, try to craft these. In this last section, I want to go over some replacements that you can do for the build. I know the frustration whenever you want to kind of like make a build similar to mine, and there's just some items that there's just not that many of, like the Skin of the Loyal. So we're going to talk about what you can replace it with. Obviously, I also got super lucky with the boots, so you're not going to have a mirror lying around to mirror it. So we're going to talk about replacements for those, as well as that I'm also going to show you how you can craft the cluster jewels that I showed you in the passive tree section. So whatever you do with the chest, realize that the most important thing here is the plus to levels. I don't use Skin of the Loyal just for the global defenses, right? I could just be running a rare chest with global defenses, life, energy shield, a Val Regalia, right? I want this because I can also double corrupt it, and I can get that double corruption. And that's something that is nice about unique body armors. So if you want to replace this chest and you don't have exactly these colors with a +4 or something, number one, you can definitely go for a +2, right? Your damage will be reduced by around about 17 to 18%. That would be number one, which I didn't even write down, which is definitely an option. Number two would be you can go for Cruelty or Spell Echo support. Cruelty is red, Spell Echo is blue, right? So it can make it easier for you to find a Skin of the Loyal that has really good corruptions on top of the right colors. You could be replacing Awakened Void Manip, Awakened Deadly Ailments, whatever you prefer. On top of that, you can also use a Skin of the Lords. The two keystones that I would go for is either Unwavering Stance or Glancing Blows. Glancing Blows just because it saves you 2 points, which is more damage basically, or Unwavering Stance because it makes it so you're just always immune to stun instead of just sometimes with Soul of the Brine King, which can be really strong, especially since we're block focused. The next replacement could be either Lioness Vision or Belly of the Beast. I'm not trolling with Belly of the Beast, by the way. We're very, very starved on increased life from our tree. We're basically scaling Aegis, so we don't need that much life. But the thing is, it's still nice to have. And once again, it's a unique chest. A lot of people are going to randomly corrupt it. If you can get a +2 on them, if you can get a +4 on them, that's a huge amount of damage. Same with Lioness Vision. So Lioness Vision just has so much armor, right? It's even more armor than we would have with the 100% increased global defenses from Skin. So if you can get your hands on like a +4 or a +3 of either Lioness Vision or Belly of the Beast, definitely go for it. If you're going for Skin of the Lord, Skin of the Lord has +2 to gem levels. That also means support gems, so you definitely want to use an Empower, for example, because that then double dips with the +2 levels. As for boots, if you don't want to think about it, go for Voidwalkers, right? These give you a ton of Pierce. I think it's 5, right? 5 Pierce. It gives you phasing, so you don't have to go for phasing Flasks, which is nice. You get move speed, decent move speed. You also kind of fix your dexterity. They're definitely not the worst boots ever. Also, you can get corrupted ones with +1 or maybe +2 to aura skill gems, which then means that you don't have to get a +1 from the helmet, which makes it easier for your Purity of Ice to get to level 23. That will be the super budget option. Now, you can make similar boots to mine just with less mods, right? These boots are ridiculous. Making them is just a big ass lottery. I wouldn't have made them if I didn't just stumble into them, for example. Now, the order of importance for how good these mods are is Pierce is better than Tailwind, better than Move Speed, better than Onslaught, better than Elusive. If you can get 3 out of those, that is already huge. If you can get 4, even better. And if you're really, really yearning for those boots and you can get a Mirror of Kalandra, then you can definitely mirror it from me whenever I'm on stream. You can also DM me. But yeah, these are up for mirror service. We finished them yesterday. We divined them. Thank you to Knoodle once again for the help. Now, next up, how to craft these jewels that I have right there. The cluster jewels, you want 12 passive eye level 84. That has to be there. Eye 84, 12 passives for the lightning cluster jewel, because this mod can only roll on lightning ones. So you want to alteration spam these. Alteration plus augmentation. You can also use a null, stuff like that, until you get exactly this. And I mean exactly this, not lower tier, anything else. You need 35% increased effect and 3% increased attack and cast speed with lightning skills. Once you have this, you will start to imprint. So this can take quite a while. Don't get discouraged. This can take like thousands of alterations, probably around about like 3,000 on average. Sometimes you get lucky, sometimes you don't get lucky. Then you're going to use beast crafting, and what you're going to do is, depending on how good you want it, you can finish this one pretty quickly. But basically, you can imprint right here if you want to, and so you're basically saving the jewel as is, and then you're going to regal. And if you don't like what you get here, for example, right spread disruption is really bad, then you get it back to where it was. In this case, I just fucked up, but whatever. You get it back to magic, and then you try again with a regal, basically until, let's undo. All right, then we're back here, right? Since you imprinted, now you can regal again. This time it's bad again. Now, every one of these hits is going to cost you like 100 or 120 chaos, depending on how expensive it is at the time we tried. You get a little bit of lightning res. So the thing you're really looking for is either all elemental resistances, chaos resistances, dexterity, all attributes. Those are all really, really good. There it is. We got it on the, what, like 6th try, 7th try. We got 5 to chaos resistance. And at this point, what you can do if you want to finish it up, I would only do this if you got a really good roll. Like T1 chaos res is really good. T1 or T2 all res is really good. T1 dexterity, T1 all attributes. You can finish this up with an augment life right here. And then now you have a 1 in 4 chance to hit T1. And then most of the time you're going to hit either T1 or T2. In this case, we got unlucky and we hit the worst one. We get now 3 life, which becomes 4 life with the increased effect per node. Now, since this build has a ton of auras, I also want to quickly go over mana reservation efficiency, because this can definitely be a problem. As you can see here, I have 11 mana left right now. My spark costs 2 mana, so it's easily sustainable. But what I will say is that obviously you won't have the same setup as I have. For example, on my helmet, I have 12% mana reservation, 10%, that's a total of 22. You might only have 10 in the implicit. you should definitely craft with the essence, so you should have the 10 on the item itself. But let's say you only have 10 up there, that would already screw over the mana reservation in this build, for example. If you have all the mana reservation that I have on my build, and you didn't forget anything, and you're sure about that, and you still cannot get everything to work, there's a few solutions. Number one, if you're just a tiny bit off, you can go for more of these jewels, right? We have 2% mana reservation efficiency of skills right here. You can obviously have more jewels like that with that kind of implicit. If that helps out, that's going to be very efficient. But otherwise, what you straight up should be doing is you should be replacing Herald of Thunder. Herald of Thunder in this build doesn't really have a purpose other than just giving you extra damage. I think in total it's like 12 or 13% more damage because it also gets scaled by Discord Artisan. But that would be an easy solution. Another thing, so this is like the solution if you're missing a ton of mana reservation for some reason. If you're just missing a small amount, as I said, the jewels, but you can also replace the enhance here. If you replace the enhance here, most people will have a level 4 enhance. So if you put that out, you will lose a little bit of armor, probably like 1,000 or 2,000, and you'll be missing 24% projectile speed. So that's how you can help yourself with that, especially if you don't have 2 level 4 enlightens. Overall, I will say Herald of Thunder is the only flex slot. It is a lot of... as you can see here, like without Herald of Thunder, we have 129 mana left from 11. So that should fix your problems outright. If that's still not enough, you'll have to think about something because the other auras are all mandatory. I'm going to go over leveling real quick. Once again, you should have Twink gear at this point. If you want a League starter, this is not a League starter once again, so I'm not going to go in depth on this. This is definitely a advanced build. You want your Tabby if you can with +2 levels, your gold rims, whatever you can afford, right? I would personally level this with Stormbrand. It's just such a fast playstyle, and you don't really need much damage on it because your gear is going to carry you. It's just super smooth. Now, I went for Replica Karui Ward on top to give you a little bit of move speed and give your Stormbrand a little bit of AoE. And the most important part in that is the Replica Tassalios. Now, these give you an absurd amount. Look at this. These are requires level 20. At level 20, each of these give you like double of what a added cold damage support gives you. Completely mind-blowing, and you can use 2 of them. And definitely don't forget that you can also catalyst them down here with the Turbulent Catalyst to give you even more LE damage. So you're going to use this up until like late game whenever you're able to equip all your gear. But yeah, overall, this build has been a complete treat. I absolutely love it. We're currently doing a 100 Simu challenge, and it's just been absolutely amazing. If I had to compare this to Arakalis, for example, which I played 2 leagues ago, where we also did this Simulacrum challenge, this is way easier. It's just Spark is so strong for Simulacrum. We also did some Delirium Mirror farming. Even at the very end of Tropical Island, it performed so well. So if you have the currency to make something like this is definitely one of these all-rounder builds that can do basically everything you wanted to in the game. Definitely something to strive towards. Even if you don't have the currency, don't get discouraged. This is one of those goals that you can maybe fulfill later. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed the guide, and see ya. But that's it for the video. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't already, subscribe. As always, a huge shout out to my Twitch subscribers and my Patreons. I couldn't do videos like this without you. Thank you so much for the support. But yeah, honestly, this build has been a lot of fun. Spark is a ton of fun. Currently doing the 100 Simulacrums. We have 41 left. Obviously going to make a video about that as well. But yeah, the skill is just really fun. It's really cozy. You don't have to aim. But yeah, with that being said, since I still don't have a slogan, see you next time.